A man named Carl was known as the Cooper family's most useful shadow. However, he was accused of betrayal and the new head ordered his execution. Upon hearing this, Carl clenched his teeth in fury. Without hesitation, he retaliated and raised his sword to the new head's neck, but he was stabbed and betrayed by the family he served. Surrounded, he wondered if this was the end. Nevertheless, he swore that if there were an afterlife, he cut them all to pieces. Soon after, Carl opened his eyes. His senses sharpened as he scanned the surroundings. Though the place looked familiar, he felt something off. Suddenly, a bucket of water was poured over him. A maid then ordered him to wash because someone was coming. Seeing the murderous look in his eyes, she slapped him thinking he was just a rebellious child. Confused by being called a child, Carl looked into the water's reflection. After seeing his face, he let out a quiet laugh. Though he now appeared to be only 3 years old, he had been reborn. In his past life, Carl was a Cooper shadow trained for missions like assassination and arson. In exchange, the family promised them wealth and glory. Due to this, many endured the hardships without complaint. Scorned as an illegitimate child, Carl trained hard to overcome his limits, but he was neglected, so he took on missions for the family. He executed enemies and slaughtered entire cities. He fought battle after battle. With that, he won many victories and expected rewards from his family. But instead, he was accused of treason and sentenced to die. Moreover, the new head revealed he was cursed by Shadow Oath blood magic. He explained that Carl's strength fed the family head, while his pain and injuries became Carl's own. As for the glory and money, they are just to entice bugs like him. Hearing this, Carl launched an attack. He swung his sword towards the head, but when it hit the family head, he was struck by multiple spells in return. Reversing the oath successfully restored Carl's powers from Alan, but it cost in his life. Now in this new life, he swore he would not make the same mistake again. At that moment, his stomach growled. He then noticed a mouse nearby, so he briefly considered eating it after recalling how rodents once tasted better than human flesh. Suddenly, someone arrived while calling him worthless. The man then informed him that Alan wanted to see him. Hearing this, Carl recalled this was when he became a shadow, but the cursed initiation left him with no memories. Realizing this, Carl bit the man's hand. The man then responded by asking if he was some kind of dog. Still, he and the others refused to let the boy act with such arrogance. One of them attacked, but Carl quickly dodged the strike and seized the man's sword. Without hesitation, he sliced through the man's arm. Seeing this, the other man was shocked that someone so young could wield the sword. On the other hand, smiled at himself since the path to revenge was now open. The Shadow Oath used forbidden blood magic to bind a shadow with a single drop of blood. Once bound, the shadow took the master's pain and transferred any strength it gained to them. Due to its cruelty, the Empire banned the Shadow Oath and erased its spell books. Now in the present, Carl watched the man earlier get slapped. The 8-year-old hare, Alan, then scolded him for losing to Carl, to which he apologized for. Ignoring him, Alan approached Carl and scolded him for touching his people, but Carl showed no fear. In response, Alan gave the order to throw Carl into the dungeon. But before the servants could act, someone intervened. Alan's mother, Kira, then told him that Carl's actions came from neglect and urged patience until after the oath ceremony. She also reminded him not to forget her words, so she leaned in and whispered their plan. Alan then eyed Carl and was puzzled by his mother's choice for him to become his shadow. Regardless, he agreed to his mother. Satisfied, Harris said she'd take the others out to avoid disruption. With that, she ordered the servant out while the others cast soundproof spells. Afterwards, Alan filled the cup and ordered the children to swear loyalty to the Cooper family as new Shadow Army members. In response, the children obediently pledged to dedicate their lives to the family. However, Carl merely stared at the cup with a smirk and began to drink it. Moments later, the cup clattered to the floor as Carl and the other children collapsed. Alan then laughed and called in fools for mistaking drugs for holy water. Without wasting time, he drew his own blood. He then declared that their strength would be his and their bodies would bear his pain. As he spoke, the dark shadow beneath him stretched outward. After that, it envelops Carl and the others. Soon after, power surged through Alan and he planned to tell his mother. But when he turned around to call for her, a sharp snap came from his knee. On the floor, he realized he couldn't move his legs. Panic then rose as he feared this was a Shadow Oath side effect his mother never mentioned. Nevertheless, he called out desperately for her, but someone called him a coward for hiding behind his mother. The person also added that his mother won't hear him due to the soundproof spell. Upon looking back, Alan was shocked to see Carl. He then asked how Carl was awake and knew the oath, but Carl claimed he knew much more. Hence, he asked how Elan would react to a reversed Shadow Oath. With that being said, he drew his sword and struck it against the floor. In response, Alan clutched his chest in pain and demanded to know what Carl had done. Hearing this, Carl recalled sacrificing everything to reclaim his stolen power. So in this new life, he was merely returning the favor. Outside, a piercing scream echoed. Upon hearing the spell had broken, Hira grew concerned for Elan. That night, the butler told Hira Alan had only fainted from excess magic, and said the servant who broke the spell was to be executed. On hearing this, Hira ordered that the servant's body be fed to the dogs. Setting that aside, the butler said Alan was still distracted and might be mentally burdened. Meanwhile, Alan felt something had happened, but couldn't recall what. Suddenly, his mother gently caressed his head. She then told him not to worry about the shadows. However, Alan slapped her hand and questioned her use of worry. He then declared himself the future Cooper head and said they were born to die for him. When asked if he was right, Hare praised him and offered a reward which made him happy. Meanwhile, Carl overheard it and thought their strong bond was a pity, because from now on, Alan was his shadow. In his past life, he found a blood magic catalogue with a shadow oath. He gave it proudly, unaware he was a victim, but later used its secrets and past lessons to regain his strength. Now all it took was a little blood to reverse the shadow oath. Even so, he knew he was too young to fight them and needed to grow stronger. With that in mind, he remembered the first step. It's the volcanic mountains that's a harsh Cooper test site for selecting shadows to sacrifice. Like Prometheus punished for stealing fire, the Cooper family threw children under 10 into the volcanic mountain. There, they walked through thorns as eagles tore at their flesh. Even dying, they couldn't stop until one reached the peak and gained Griffin's blessing for an unbreakable body. Now in the present, their trainer Ennis told them they had 3 days to reach their goal by any means. Their only objective was to survive and reach the peak of the mountain. He also added that anyone who failed or gave up would be executed after the 3 days. For their bright future, he took out his whistle and gave the signal for them to begin. However, Ennis noticed something unusual. He saw that Carl appeared completely calm. Another trainer then noted Carl was the illegitimate child who offended Elan, and Ennis quickly remembered. At that moment, Carl began to climb the mountain. They then laughed at his choice to climb instead of taking the slope and predicted he'd fall to his death. One trainer even suggested retrieving his corpse early, but Eno stopped him. He said he had just thought of a funny idea as it was about time for someone to show up. Soon after, the children saw something descending the mountain and thought it was just an eagle. But when they saw it clearly, they screamed that it was a monster. Meanwhile, Carl finally reached the peak. There, he was greeted by Griffin standing surrounded by the corpses of children. Upon noticing Carl, Griffin bit down even harder on one of the corpses. At the same time, Ian has decided to use Griffin to get rid of Carl as punishment for offending Alan. Hoping to make Alan happy, he readied his bow and fired an arrow directly at Griffin. In response, Griffin demanded to know who had done it. Upon spotting Carl, she charged at him to kill him, but Carl jumped to avoid Griffin's attack. Drawing on the experience of his previous life, he grabbed onto Griffin. While on it, he knew that in order to receive Griffin's blessing, all he had to do was to tame Griffin. After Carl struck Griffin's head, he stepped back and realized Griffin wouldn't be tamed without defeat since it had human-like intelligence. Knowing this, Carl knew he had to risk a trick, so he charged again. As he attempted another strike, Griffin began to gather power in her mouth. Following that, she unleashed it in a powerful blast aimed at Carl. The force of the attack sent Carl flying toward the cliff's edge. Fortunately, he managed to grab onto it just in time. Climbing up, he remembered that he only had the skills, but his body is still of a 3-year-old. That meant his body was far too small and light to close the gap against Griffin. Suddenly, an idea came to him when he spotted a nearby cave. At that moment, Griffin charged another attack and blew a powerful gust of wind toward Carl. As Carl dodged, he realized Griffin's wind grew stronger with each breath and rose from level 1 to 10. If they reached the final stage, there would be no way to escape. Thinking quickly, Carl came up with another plan. Since he could not outrun Griffin's wind, he decided to use the force of the attack to launch himself into the cave. Just as he had hoped, the wind carried him straight toward the opening. While airborne, he used the Shadow Oath to drain Alan's power and save his own. Elsewhere in the mansion, the servants panicked when Alan suddenly fainted again. Back at the mountain, Carl landed inside the cave successfully. Without hesitation, he rushed deeper inside, but Griffin followed him and asked where he thought he was going. Just as she was about to strike, she froze in shock. There in Carl's arms was her cub, crying for help. Suddenly, Carl explained that he knew Griffin's cubs couldn't fly at birth and assured her he meant no harm. On the contrary, he could actually heal its wings and help it fly, which stunned Griffin. However, Carl pointed out that he had a condition. Meanwhile, outside, Ennis and the trainer thought Griffin ate Carl and wanted to report it to Elan for a reward. A voice then replied he'd send them, and Griffin appeared behind them. On top of her head stood Carl telling them they would have to wait in hell for Elan. The two men were stunned and tried to flee, but Griffin quickly devoured them both. Afterward, Griffin said she kept her promise, and Carl replied their next stop was the mountain's north side. Soon, they arrived at the Land of Stone. There, Griffin said Carl must retrieve the sword of Perseus and Medusa's healing blood, and he agreed at once. But deep down, he had no intention of helping her or retrieving the sword. As Griffin opened the entrance, Carl calmly planned to use her power to destroy the Land of Stone. Immediately, they were welcomed by Medusa and the stones. In Carl's past life, Harris sent shadows for the sword of Perseus to counter a hidden Medusa statue that turned all to stone for Elan. To protect Alan from Medusa, the shadows took heavy losses. In the end, Carl alone survived with the sword of Perseus required S-class talent, which he lacked. But Alan has S-class talent, so he easily wielded it and slew Medusa. Hence, Alan was hailed as the chosen one and gained vast resources and loyal followers. But in this life, Carl vowed that if he couldn't have the sword, neither would Alan. Suddenly, Griffin asked where the sword and Medusa's blood were after seeing only rubble. Unexpectedly, the door behind them slammed shut. Alarmed, Griffin asked Carl if he was trying to trick her, but Carl just nervously told her to look behind. There, the stone statues began charging at them. As Griffin fought, she asked why the statues awakened, but Carl said he didn't know. Despite that, Griffin continued to shatter the statues one by one. However, the shattered pieces started to reassemble and merge into a single entity. Seeing this, Carl recognized them as Dino, Inyo, and Pemphra that resembled the Greer sisters. Like Medusa, they were Poseidon's daughters with power over seawater, so Carl urged they run. As they escaped, Griffin told Carl to find the sword, and he replied he was already searching. But Griffin warned the place would collapse and they'd die if they delayed. Carl then pointed to a rune on the and hinted that it might be the solution. However, he actually plans to let the realm collapse and bury everything. Besides, he already knew a hidden passage from his past life to escape. Pretending to help, he told Griffin the rune said to remove the eye above to stop the attacks. Griffin immediately looked up and saw the eye. Without hesitation, she charged toward it and removed it. As she passed by the Greer, they began to dissolve. Impressed, Griffin remarked how amazing it was. Carl then explained that Perseus stole Greer's eye to find Medusa, so the eye is their weakness. Intrigued, Griffin asked if the rune showed the blood in sword's location. In response, Carl pointed towards the sword's direction. Just as he had said, the sword of Perseus was indeed close. Carl reveals Perseus used the sword against Medusa, and her red blood is poisonous while the green can heal. But Carl said it was just legend hinting at a deeper secret that made Griffin curious. Hence, he revealed that when the sword of Perseus appears, Medusa herself would be resurrected. Seeing Medusa attack Griffin, Carl decided to leave them behind. Since once activated, the Medusa statue won't stop until beheaded by the sword of Perseus. But just as he turned, he noticed something behind him and quickly dodged Medusa's tail. After landing safely, he eyed her suspiciously and wondered where Griffin went. To his surprise, Griffin shrank herself and surrendered everything to him. Before he could react, Medusa launched another attack. While dodging, Carl felt grateful he passed through the realm before and still had options. He then immediately thought of getting the Knights of the Round Table's shield. Using this, he could reflect Medusa's gaze and lessen the risk of petrification. It could also serve as protection against her direct gaze attack, so he rushed to retrieve it. As soon as he blocked her attack, the impact sent him flying. From this, he realized that the shield alone was not enough. Looking around, he saw the secret exit was already destroyed. Worse, his current talent wasn't enough to wield the sword of Perseus. Still, he figured he had to try, so he ran toward the sword. There, he reached out to grab it. To his shock, he lifted it effortlessly. Stunned, he wondered how it was possible. As the sword was dragged, he still doubted he was strong enough to use it. Suddenly, he recalled Alan calling him a mere D rank for daring to touch the sword. He also remembered them stealing his talent and hid it using an amnesia spell. Recalling all this, Carl began to understand what had really happened. There he saw Alan claiming his swordsmanship now belonged to him. Just then, a surge of immense power enveloped Carl's body. Curious, Griffin peeked to see what was happening. As a result, she was surprised. After all, she saw Carl completely unharmed. As she gazed into his eyes, she saw him behead Medusa, and this made her call him a monster. Later, while collecting Medusa's blood, Carl realized his past sword talent could have been S rank. Vahira stole his talent for Elon and erased his memories with powerful magic. Carl then laughed at the memory, which made Griffin curious what amused him. At that moment, Carl found his family interesting, but they would still face his revenge. Seeing Carl laugh like that, Griffin decided to quietly slip away, but Carl suddenly ordered her to come back. Griffin then asked why and was confused by her nervousness, but Carl just asked if her head was made of metal, which left her even more puzzled. Eventually, she forced her way through the crumbling walls. Upon landing, she realized Carl used her, but stayed silent for her offspring's sake. As the realm collapsed, Stone Medusa's spirit was transferred to a shield. With that, its eyes turned bright. Later, after returning to Griffin's domain, Griffin formally declared she would bless Carl with her title. She granted him an unbreakable body that is immune to all attacks. As his body healed, he felt relieved he no longer had to transfer wounds to Anlan and risk suspicion. However, Carl needs to hide his S-rank sword talent to avoid attention. For the moment, he told Griffin to give Medusa's blood to her cub to heal its wings. After the cub drank from the vial, it was suddenly enveloped in a glowing aura. Moments later, its wings were healed and it began to fly for the first time. But Carl said the cub would remain a foolish bird without a master, which puzzled Griffin. Carl then explained it was kind advice as she once grew strong by accepting a master. Griffin then agreed since her master used to feed her human brains for strength and doubted she'd find another like him, but someone suddenly came to her mind, so she called for Carl. She then asked Carl to take her child as his pet, but Carl already knew it was exceptionally gifted. Seeing that she had taken the bait, he agreed and insisted on a deal where he wanted all her information on Blood Cooper. Additionally, he asked about the key to the Cooper family's Shrine of Blood. Later that night at the mansion, Hero was surprised no one knew why Alan fainted and asked how long it would last. But the butler assured that Alan was protected by shadows that healed and strengthened him. Although she agreed, she suspected someone was behind Alan's symptoms since the Shadow Oath ceremony. Suddenly, the butler told her Carl topped the confidence test as expected. However, Hero was stunned to learn Carl used Griffin to kill the walkers and tamed her offspring as his pet. Without hesitation, she handed her coffee to the butler and instructed him to look for Carl. As she walked, Carl greeted her and asked if there was anything he could do to help. In response, she immediately asked why he had killed the walkers. He explained that it was for the family and that a shadow officer killed by a child was useless. As he asked Hera if she agreed, Hera looked at him in horror. Amused by Hera's expression, Carl felt unbothered by any tricks she had left. To his surprise, she told the butler named Doug to reward him with time in Eden Spring. Carl then thanked her, thinking Eden Spring might be his chance. After Carl left, Hera ordered Doug to speed up deprivation magic to give Carl's talent to Elin and secure his hair status. Satisfied, Hera spared Carl and was eager to see his pride fall later. Meanwhile, at the Eden Spring, Carl wandered around deep in thought. He recalled Griffin saying her master seal his soul there to pass on sword skills and preserve the Cooper legacy. Griffin also gave Carl a key and told him to follow Eden Spring's undercurrent to a cave. Still, she warned Eden Spring had changed and its blood magic user would be tough to face. Knowing this, Carl realized claiming the swordsmanship inheritance before Alan wouldn't be easy. Nearby, the children talked about Carl after he topped the training and tamed Griffin's child, but Renault's sidekick, Lucian, appeared and mocked Carl as a prostitute's son. Renault also mocked Carl for looking like a monkey yet reaching the summit first, making Lucian laugh. Watching them, Carl recalled they were once his subordinates who framed him with Alan's support. When Carl didn't respond, Renault lunged to test his so-called invincible body. As he threw a punch, Carl swiftly caught his hand, which shocked him. Without hesitation, Carl twisted his arm to demonstrate his strength. This startled Lucian, who immediately pulled out a knife and lunged at Carl. But when the blood finally splattered, Lucian froze. To his horror, he had stabbed Renault instead. With that, Carl calmly claimed he accidentally used Renault as a meat shield. After that, Carl kicked Renault toward Lucian, sending them both flying into the spring to recover. After all, he planned to use them for training and turn them into his pawns. But as he watched, he noticed black magic energy swirling around Renault. He then questioned this sinister magic and recalled Griffin's warning about the spring. Realizing the danger, Carl knew he had to reach the bottom without touching a drop. Just then, a familiar voice cried out nearby. Carl saw a servant harshly scolding a girl over spilled tea and realized it was Anna. But Anna defended herself, which only angered the servant more. Unexpectedly, Carl's sword cut through the servant, splitting his head and body cleanly. Seeing this, the other children screamed and ran to report it. Meanwhile, Carl calmly extended his hand to Anna and helped her up. Seeing his face, Anna thought he looked like a prince, but Carl, on the other hand, wondered if he had frightened her. Hence, he quickly apologized, but she said no. After thanking him, she introduced herself and asked for his name. Seeing her, Carl recalled how Anna was his gifted best friend who always cared for him. They had even fought side by side for a few days. And of course, there was also a time when she confessed to him. Now as she continued to thank him for saving her, he found himself thinking that this 5-year-old version of Anna was incredibly cute. Pushing that aside, he brushed it off as a gentleman's duty and told her to call him Carl. Shifting the topic, he asked if she knew how to drain or enter the spring without touching the water. Hearing his question, Anna asked if he had sensed it too, which puzzled him. She then whispered the spring healed, but blocked all other healing, which created dependence. Carl then realized the Coopers used the spring to control shadows to force them to return when in pain. Suddenly, Anna offered to help him enter the spring safely to thank him for saving her. With that, she cast a spell. Soon, her duck magic enveloped them and let them enter the spring without getting wet. Hearing this, Carl realized it was isolation magic, though Anna's naming was still ridiculous. But suddenly, guards began hunting him for killing the servant. With that, he quickly grabbed Anna and dove into the spring. Once inside, he noticed the strong undercurrent and knew this was the right spot. However, Anna wanted to leave the place quickly. But before he could react, the undercurrent pulled them in. Later, Anna tried to wake Carl. When he finally opened his eyes, he immediately questioned where they were and searched his pocket. After finding the key, Anna asked about it, and he explained it unlocked the palace of the sword spirit. But Anna noted no visible door, so Carl said the door might need to be summoned. Though unsure what a sword spirit was, Anna offered to try. Determined, she called for the key and asked its master to open the door. While she was doing this, an enemy lurked nearby. As Carl sensed danger, the enemy charged at them, and he pulled Anna to safety. After narrowly avoiding the attack, he noticed that the door had finally appeared. He then called out to Anna, but she had lost consciousness. With no other choice, he carried her in his arms. He then gently placed her down in a safe spot, and he cast Anna's invisibility magic to hide her. After all, he knew the battle for the sword spirit's inheritance would be tough. As he stepped through the door, he was greeted by the sight of countless corpses. So even though he was prepared, he found the scene overwhelming. Then he noticed someone nearby. At the same time, the monster was still busy with its prey. After sensing another presence, it paused and turned to the guest. Carl realized Eden Spring was no healing spring, but it was where the Cooper family kept their concubines, and everyone brought there was eventually fed to the sword demon. Suddenly, the monster emerged before him. Sensing Carl, it recognized the scent of an S-rank talent. Carl instinctively stepped back and was unsettled that the creature knew that. The demon then wondered if he was the gifted child, but was confused by his rough appearance. Hence, it assumed Carl was just an illegitimate child after the inheritance. As their weapons clashed, the demon warned the inheritance required a fight, but Carl only wanted to kill it. Amused, the demon said it was expected from his blood Cooper's descendant. Moreover, Carl is crazy enough. Without warning, the monster made a swift strike and hit Carl directly, sending him crashing to the ground. As it observed Carl lying still, it declared him too weak, but then something unexpected caught its attention. Carl's wounds healed, which surprised the demon that Griffin had already blessed him. While the demon recalled seeing Griffin, Carl remembered blood sacrifice to seal the demon. So despite his limits, Carl stood and clinging to a sliver of hope. Suddenly, a cross rose behind the demon. In an instant, its hand was pierced. Nailed to the cross, it realized too late it was trapped in a magic sealing blood formation. With that, Carl declared that the demon was long dead, and the Empire had learned to counter blood magic. Now, Carl just had to take its heart to claim the inheritance. In response, the demon let out a furious roar of defiance. Just as the blade was about to land, it broke free and began mocking Carl. Carl backed away as the demon laughed and called him a little mouse. However, it declared that the game was over because it no longer intended to play. Summoning its lackeys, the demon admitted Carl had skill and potential, but it thought that wasn't enough to inherit its sword technique. While fighting the blood spirits, Carl was awed by its control over blood. Unexpectedly, he was struck and surrounded because the attacks were too concentrated. In response, he activated the Holy Sword protection to defend himself against the magic, but the demon touched the barrier and mocked its futility. With a single touch, the protective aura shattered. In one swift move, the monster seized Carl by the neck. Holding him in place, it coldly stated that a cat always eats the mouse after it's done toying with it. As Carl struggled, he began to feel his blood and mana slowly draining away. Suddenly, the monster said Carl's aura resembled a concubine it once devoured and possibly his mother. Hearing this, Carl was triggered. Nevertheless, the demon called it the perfect time to taste her child's blood. Meanwhile, Carl recalled when his mother helped him sleep. She had gently assured him that everything would be all right. He also recalled picking a flower for her, but he tricked before he could give it. Suddenly, his mother said she was leaving and disappeared despite his pleas. Later, Carl was bullied for being abandoned. Children hurled stones at him, calling him trash. Still, he held on to his belief that his mother had never thrown him away. Now facing the demon, the truth sank in. Rage rose as he grasped the truth. Hence, he stabbed the demon while yelling in rage over his mother's death. As the sword pierced its chest, the demon let out a scream of pain. He also questioned how Carl had known about his blood feast magic. Enraged, the demon threw him and realized that Carl burned his blood to strike. Weak from summoning, the monster stumbled off to devour more women. As the monster fed, Carl stepped in and asked if it tasted good. With no reply, he stepped closer and coldly asked if his mother tasted good. As the sword struck, an image of his mother calling him flashed, making him freeze. Seeing his sword still lodged in the monster's head, Carl pulled it out. As it fell, the demon deemed Carl mad and planned to seek more concubines. But before it could act, Carl stabbed him once more. This time, Carl maniacally pierced him. Desperate, the demon begged for his life and to be his sword spirit. but Carl looked at him coldly and said he was not worthy. In an instant, the demon's body exploded. From the remains, the last key to imprint the swordsmanship into Carl emerged. But Carl dropped his sword. He whispered it was all delusion, a born motherless monster. But his mother's image appeared saying he's not a monster and she was always there. Suddenly, someone called his name. He turned to see Anna running toward him. When she reached him, she gasped at his wounds and offered to heal him. While Anna cast healing magic on him, Carl remembered that in his past life, she had suffered the same fate as the concubines. Without thinking, he pulled her into a hug in this confused Anna. Meanwhile, Carl silently vowed to never let that tragedy happen again. The demon's disappearance caused chaos, so the Gargans were executed, and no one dared bully Anna after that. However, Carl was blamed for the demon's loss, and Hera had him confined, bled, and poisoned. Despite all this, Carl survived unharmed. 4 years later at Cooper Grounds, a servant was swiftly defeated. He then begged Alan for mercy, but Alan just mocked his weak ability. Watching Hugh of the Asset family said the rumors were true about Alan's great talent, but Leon of the Coopers replied modestly. Suddenly, a shout nearby drew their attention. There, they saw Carl going up against multiple guards. Carl then used his shadow blade and struck the guards with a move called Sword Wind. Seeing this, he was impressed by the skill and number of Carl's techniques. He noted Carl's age usually meant Iron rank, yet he was already at Silver Guardian level. Meanwhile, Alan became furious that Carl was stealing his spotlight. In response, he challenged Carl to a duel. Hearing this, Carl recalled Alan's true power was gone in this life. Hence, he agreed to use this moment to test Alan's skill. Meanwhile, Alan plans to use this as a chance to fake an accident and kill Carl. A crowd then cheered for Alan to prove himself as the true sword genius. Immediately, Alan moved and attacked with full confidence. However, Carl casually told him to hit harder, which left the land confused. With that, Carl effortlessly pushed him back with a single strike. Frustrated, Alan charged again while recalling his mother's claim that none could match his strength. But Carl dodged easily and saw Alan's weak fake magic that proved he lacked real sword talent. Knowing this, Carl decided it was time to show Alan a real sword strike. As Alan turned, Carl's blade immediately struck his eye. Alan then screamed in pain as the guards rushed to check on him. Seeing this, Hugh burst into laughter. He then called Alan unimpressive and hinted at fake defeats earlier, so Leon called him rude. Hugh then apologized and explained that he didn't want his sister marrying a weak fiancé. But Leon said Hugh's sister might not have married without the royal family's help, which angered Hugh. Letting it go, Hugh walked away and reminded Leon of their joint operation in 10 days. After Hugh left, Leon turned to Elan with clear disappointment. He then asked who Carl was and the servant said he was an unrecorded mistress's child. Hearing this, Leon assumed Carl had inherited sword talent and ordered him brought to his study. Later inside the study, Leon used his eye ability to analyze Carl. Meanwhile, Carl kneels before him and asks for his orders, but Leon sensed no power and thought Carl was hiding talent to steal the hair spot. With that, he told Carl to lead the 10th squad to Crystal City in 10 days to get a dragon egg. Holding out a sword, he explained that it could activate teleportation to Crystal City. Hearing this, Carl knew Leon meant harm since stealing a dragon egg would enrage the demonic dragon. Even so, he took the mission and was eager for the dragon egg. But before leaving, he made a request that changed Leon's expression. A few days later, Carl and the others arrived at the forest. There, Anna felt wrong to stay idle, especially after Carl told Leon she'd serve him. However, Carl said it was fine and asked Reynold and Lucian, who quickly agreed. Eventually, they reached Crystal City and wondered where the crystal and dragon egg were. However, someone mocked them for knowing nothing about Crystal City. That person turned out to be Gloria, Hugh's sister, and Alan's fiancée, who called them a joke. Nevertheless, she still extended her hand to Carl in greeting. But Carl ignored her and told Anna to stay with Mayo, which offended Gloria. As Carl walked away, she insisted that she was talking to him. But Carl replied it'd be a waste if they didn't activate the portal before sunset. He then recalled how she used to pester him to train and was still clinging to him now. Still, he silently hoped that Mayo would complete the mission he had given. Moving forward, Carl and Gloria's swords on the altar surprised the Coopers, so the Isaacs explained it was a teleportation. Soon after, the Crystal City appeared and sparked wonder about the dragon eggs. Unexpectedly, Carl noticed a blonde soldier preparing to attack the Coopers and steal the dragon egg for the Essex. The blonde soldier then raised his sword eagerly for the reward. Immediately, Carl ordered everyone to fall back. Right after he spoke, a massive explosion erupted. After that, the sentinel appeared and made the soldier tremble. Seeing this, Gloria called the blonde soldier useless. Still, she saved him with her thorn slash. Afterwards, she challenged the soldier's motives and exposed his selfishness despite his claim of loyalty. Before she could continue, the soldier told her to look behind her. While she was still in a daze, the sentinels had already been taken down. To their surprise, it was Carl Gwyd defeated them. He then ordered all the shadows to get into formation, and they quickly complied. The shadows spread across the ground and bound the remaining sentinel. Carl charged to test if their light could defeat their shadows. With that, he destroyed the sentinels completely. Witnessing this, the Essex soldiers were amazed Carl alone defeated the sentinels. Even Gloria had to admit that Carl was impressive. Soon after, a flaming crystal appeared. Carl quickly absorbed the power and rose from Silver Guardian to Gold Sword Master. Now his next destination was the nearby pillar. Upon seeing an empty slot, he placed the crystal into it. A sudden tremor followed, and they soon saw the altar was descending because the dragon's den had been opened. After a while, the platform reached its destination, revealing what appeared to be the lair of the demonic dragon. Seeing the dragon eggs, Reno and the others thought there were enough dragon eggs for everyone. Observing this, Carl saw them as fools rushing into the dragon's jaws. Suddenly, the dragon awakened and sparked instant panic. As others fled, Gloria urged come while Carl stayed behind to cover their escape with the eggs. However, the altar suddenly began to rise. They spotted Gray of the Coopers trying to escape with an egg. Gray revealed Leon ordered him to take the eggs and lead Carl since only the Coopers deserved a dragon egg. Before leaving, he told them to die for the family's good, which angered them. With that, Gloria called Leon ruthless for abandoning them and Carl, but Carl said he expected it. Hearing this, Gloria asked if he came knowing he'd die, but Carl said she was overthinking. As the dragon breathed fire, he slashed its wing and declared he wouldn't die today. But the dragon became enraged and sent Carl flying. Gloria quickly rushed to his side, but the dragon prepared to breathe fire on them again. So she raised her moonshine shield and asked if Carl was still confident now. Carl said he was fine and asked her to stall the dragon so he could strike its heart. Additionally, he told her that only she could do it. Hearing this made Gloria blush, and she immediately agreed. Fired up, she refused to be outdone since she was a skilled swordsman too, but Carl could only smirk. Suddenly, Gloria began signaling to Carl that it was time to attack. Noticing he stood still, she called out and questioned his silence. With no response, she feared he was too weak to move and knew they'd all die if she didn't act. Determined, she unleashed her sword dance of destruction. In response, the dragon howled in pain. As it collapsed, Gloria wondered if she had really defeated it. Just then, Reynold and Lucian rushed over and began hitting the dragon. Still, Gloria questioned whether it was truly her doing. Suddenly, the dragon opened its eyes again. Seeing this, Reno shouted the dragon was berserk and urged everyone to hide. Hearing this, Gloria stood frozen in disbelief. Meanwhile, Carl refused to retreat. Instead, he activated the third skill from his swordsmanship inheritance, which is the blood shadow slash. As a result, the dragon's blood rose into the air and flowed toward Carl's sword for his technique. A moment later, Carl's clone appeared, and he commanded them to condense. But Carl's use of blood magic and a transformed sword stunned others, and Gloria said it could explain the vanished sword spirit. However, she realized Carl had stayed behind waiting for her to draw the dragon's blood. Frustrated, she scolded him for using her, but Carl didn't care. In his previous life, he once a discarded pawn, so he now refused to wait quietly for death. With one final strike, Carl sliced through the dragon's neck. As the dragon's head fell, Glory ran toward Carl to praise him. However, he suddenly warned her not to come any closer. Seeing his expression, they became worried. Carl saw his reflection in the blood, where the demon warned he'd soon depend on flesh and blood like him. Pointing toward Gloria and the others, the demon urged him to kill them. Overwhelmed, Carl went after their blood, and Lucian ran quickly after seeing Carl being demonized by blood magic. However, someone called Carl. Seeing it was Anna casting spells, Carl finally collapsed. Seeing this, Anna immediately pulled him back to safety. Later in the forest, Anna kept trying to wake him. When Carl awoke, she said she used purification magic to stop his demonization for now. She then stood up and showed him the last intact dragon egg. She said Gray was captured, the egg kept secret, and Gloria had left so Carl needn't worry about the mission. Hearing this, Carl thanked her, but he was never worried about the mission. Reaching for his sword, Carl recalled Mio was to fake Anna's death so she could escape the family. Frustrated, Carl raised his sword at Mayo for failing to carry out the mission. But Anna shielded Mayo, who talked back that Anna wanted to follow Carl. Suddenly, was interrupted when Reno called out to Carl. Seeing them draw their swords, Carl thought they were going to take the dragon egg from him. But to his surprise, Reno and Lucian stabbed Gray instead. As they kneeled, they thanked Carl for saving them and vowed to follow him over the Cooper family. While Carl stood in shock, Anna suddenly pointed out that the egg was moving. As the egg cracked open, a demon dragon hatched from it. Immediately, Carl asked the dragon if it would accept him as master. In response, the dragon agreed without hesitation. Witnessing this, Reno happily declared that the demonic dragon had been tamed. After they congratulated Carl, they declared his rebellion against the family had begun. Back at the mansion, Alan asked to visit the racetrack, but Harris said to wait until his father was done with work. Hearing this, Leon scolded Alan for not being like Carl, who slayed the dragon and tamed its cub, but Hera defended Alan by saying he could have done the same if he'd been sent. Ignoring Leon, she chose to accompany Alan to the racetrack. After they left the room, Alan cheerfully ordered the servant to bring his horsewhip. Meanwhile, Hero asked Doug about the progress of the deprivation magic research. Doug said the research was done, and they just needed an S-rank subject before using it on Carl. Satisfied, Hero vowed to finally eliminate Carl. 5 years later, Carl had finally undergone full purification. After being freed from demonization risk, he thanked Anna. But Anna said she should thank him for the wonderful staff. Suddenly, they noticed a figure at the window. Carl rushed over and recognized Doug, who had already escaped. Moments later, Reynold and Lucian arrived to report their task's outcome. They revealed that Dove planned a ritual in 3 days with black mags and found another S-rank target. Carl then suspected it's a deprivation magic ritual, but was surprised the target wasn't him. But he then realized that it could be Anna. 3 days later, Anna grumbled as she cleaned the storage room mess. Suddenly, Doug appeared behind her and covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Soon after, she fainted. Later during the ritual, the mags began chanting around her. They asked for her power to serve Doug like a shadow. Doug then raised the knife to steal Anna's talent by using her blood in the formation. But when he struck, she vanished. Anna then appeared behind him and revealed he'd stabbed an illusion. Seeing him surprised, she reminded him not to underestimate her. She then cast Shining Star Lock, which binds him tightly as he cursed her cunning. Still restrained, Dove commanded the mags to attack her. Immediately, Anna closed her eyes and covered her ears as Carl instructed. Suddenly, a loud sound echoed. Moments later, a dragon and griffin surprised the mags. Nevertheless, they were immediately devoured by them. Meanwhile, Doug recognized them instantly, but someone scolded him for daring to harm Anna. Hence, Doug confirmed that it was really Carl. Carl then confronted him and asked why Anna was targeted. Doug confessed that deprivation magic works once, so Anna was chosen as the test subject. Realizing Anna was endangered because of him, Carl vowed to punish Doug. Hence, he cut his hand and performed a shadow oath that left Doug stunned. Afterward, he ordered Doug to report the ritual's success and immediate start. Hearing Doug ask why, he explains that it was time to expose Alan's true colors. The next day, Doug told Hera the experiment succeeded as Alan tried to invite Gloria to the garden. Still, Hera asked if he was sure, so Doug said the full moon at Alan's coming of age was perfect timing. Please, she praised him and was convinced Alan would soon lead the family and empire. Meanwhile, Alan tried to please his mother by wooing Gloria and saying she was playing hard to get, but he was stunned when she suddenly aimed her sword at him. She then questioned if he deserved to be her fiancé, leaving him baffled. But Gloria exclaimed that he needed to defeat her first, so Alan had her dragged away. Just then, someone blocked her sword. It was Carl. With a ridiculing smile, Carl ordered someone to drag Gloria away. Furious, Alan claimed he only forgot his sword and didn't need help. Unexpectedly, Gloria asked Carl to train, but he refused, leaving Alan to wonder about her closeness. When Gloria blushed and told Carl to reconsider, Alan realized she likes him. Clenching his fists, he tried to confront Carl, but Hera called him back, so he decided to deal with Gloria after their marriage. With that, he said goodbye to her, and Gloria cheerfully did the same. Without him, Gloria threatened to attack, and Carl finally agreed, but with one condition. He asked her to introduce him to her brother, Hugh. Later that night, Carl told Hugh he'd cancel Gloria and Alan's engagement if he lent him the illusionary time box. While looking at Hugh, Carl aimed to exploit Hugh's desire to cancel the engagement that the royal family had always rejected. However, Hugh dismissed Carl as an arrogant kid who couldn't undo a royal engagement. In response, Carl drew his sword, declaring only he could solve Hugh's problem. Upon seeing Carl's sword, Hugh began to suspect Carl was the Cooper family's true S-rank talent. Suddenly, Carl stepped forward and told him he'll destroy Alan since the engagement couldn't be cancelled. Hearing this, Hugh looked at him in silence. 1 month later, inside the mansion, Doug tells Hera that Carl wasn't with the illegitimate children and Alan was searching for him, so Hera told Doug to help Alan. Meanwhile, the summoned Cooper illegitimate children discussed if it was to showcase Alan as the heir. Outside, Leon was informed the guests were seated and preparations had begun. However, Hugh's sudden appearance puzzled Leon, who didn't recall inviting him. As Hugh claimed he just came to watch, Carl told Lucian to activate the illusionary box. After Lucian disappeared, the box was surrounded by chants. After that, the shadows began to unlock it. As a result, the entire mansion was enveloped by its power. As Carl watched, a voice called out saying he'd finally been found. It was Alan, and he asked while Carl was hiding alone. Inside a basement, Alan apologized to Carl as he drew a dagger. With it in hand, he declared that Carl's talent now belonged to him, and this was his fate. Seeing this, Anna urgently called out Carl's name. However, a girl suddenly told her to stop napping and get to work. But Anna knew it wasn't a dream since it was the stars showing a past life's reality. Realizing Carl was in danger, she rushed to his location. As she shouted his name, she planned to stop Alan before he could act. But when she arrived, Alan was offering Carl wine in their father's name. Immediately, she tried casting magic to put Alan to sleep for months. However, someone suddenly called her name. Hira arrived and ordered her servant to quietly take Anna away. Hence, Anna was then restrained by the servant. But this made Hira wonder why Anna could still use magic if the spell had worked. Still, Hira refocused on Carl and Alan since the ceremony was more urgent. Meanwhile, Carl finally drank the wine. As a result, he collapsed along with the glass and made Alan call him a fool for falling for the same trick twice. Later in the basement, Alan asked how Carl could have S-rank talent. He then punched Carl and demanded to know how he tamed a demonic dragon. He also hit Carl for gaining glorious favor. Lastly, he declared that everything should have been his. Suddenly, Hira told him to stop and begin the ceremony instead, and he agreed. Doug then gave him a dagger that can pierce Carl's body, which Alan thought wasn't bad. Holding the dagger, he declared Carl's sword talent would be his. As he stabbed Carl, he announced that this was Carl's true fate. As he told him to scream, he declared himself the true heir with the strongest powers, but Carl's body began trembling. He then burst into laughter and asked if Alan thought this was just a play. Hearing this, Alan and Harrow were both shocked. Suddenly, Carl broke free from the chains. He urged them to open their eyes since their fate was on the line. With a snap of his fingers, the illusion faded and revealed they were in the banquet hall. The crowd saw everything in Moktolan by calling his S-rank talent fake. Hearing this, Hira realized Carl saw through their plan and knew she had to act fast. So she and Alan quickly tried to explain that Carl was framing him. At that moment, someone began clapping. Hugh then called it an exciting show and asked Leon if he agreed. Hearing this, Leon furiously called out Alan's name. Hira quickly claimed she gave Alan the order and asked Leon to punish her instead, but Leon pushed Alan away. Seeing this, Carl commented that Leon was truly ruthless. Alan then shouted that Carl was just a bastard and everything should be his, but Harris silenced him. Despite this, the guests murmured that Leon earned his place while his son shamed the family. Hearing this, Leon raised his sword and left the land confused. Leon then addressed his children and declared the start of the succession contest. Hearing this, his illegitimate children realized they could now compete and began plotting to eliminate Elan. Witnessing this, laughed after seeing the true Cooper's spirit power above all. Without hesitation, he cancelled the engagement because Alan is unworthy of his sister. Leon then realized that Hugh had sided with Carl by lending him the illusionary box. But with nobles present and rumors risk, Leon chose to step back for now. He then agreed to request the king to cancel the engagement, which earned Hugh's praise. Leon then told Carl he could compete for hair, but warned not to shame the family. If he did, Leon promised to make him disappear, but Carl simply asked if Leon really thought he cared about the title. With that, Carl challenged Leon to make him disappear. Hearing this, Leon was left confused by Carl's defiance. Still, he chose to retreat for the time being. Seeing this, a servant questioned him, but Leon chose to wait and see Carl's potential. Still, he admitted Carl was irritating and unsure who he took after. Later inside the mansion, Hira asked who leaked their plans, but Doug claimed he didn't know. Just then, one of her servants asked what they should do with Anna. Hira ordered them to feed her to the demonic creatures. However, she suddenly paused. She realized that Anna using magic meant the ritual had failed. She then glanced at Doug and suspected the ritual had failed. Hence, she ordered Doug to demonstrate the power he had stolen from Anna. But Doug said her talent was too advanced and needed more time. However, Hira refused and ordered Doug's execution. Alarmed, Doug claimed Carl forced him, but they struck him down instantly. Seeing his body on the floor, Hira said a traitor dog wasn't worth hearing. She then turned to Anna and decided to extract her talent directly. As she began draining her, she noticed that Anna's body showed no burn marks and that led her to suspect that Anna had an ice soul body. She recalled ice soul girls could boost men's power once they mature as hotbeds. With this in mind, Hira made plans to use Anna. The next day, Carl suspected Leon spared Alan out of fear of his mother's backing. Furthermore, Hira had confined Carl immediately, but he refused to leave until Alan suffered as he once did. Suddenly, he heard a knock and thought it was Anna. To his surprise, it was Gloria sent by her brother to retrieve the time box. Seeing her, he briefly thought of killing Alan with her family's help, but she saw his look and questioned him. As he handed over the box, he asked why such a weak illusion item was their heirloom. She then tells him on one condition to make him owe her despite the legend being doubted. However, Carl casually said goodbye instead. Irritated, she challenged him to a duel. Later in the arena, Gloria began attacking Carl with her sword, but he effortlessly deflected her strikes and eventually knocked her backward. Declaring that she had lost again, Gloria called him ungentlemanly. But Carl reminded her she insisted he go all out, and she owed him the time box a secret. Reluctantly, she said the legend claims mastering the time box lets one sacrifice their life and rebirth another. Hearing this, Carl realized Anna gave her life to revive him, so he now owed her protection and revenge. However, someone arrived to inform him that Anna had been captured. Upon hearing the news, Carl immediately asked who had captured Anna. Lucian responded that someone saw Hera and some servants take her last night. Gloria added she heard rumors Anna would become the young master's mistress, but she assumed the young master referred to was Carl. Realizing this, Carl rushed off to find Alan. Gloria quickly ordered the others to follow him. Meanwhile, Alan was still fuming over Carl's humiliation and was calmed by a servant on Hera's orders, but Alan kicked him. A servant then showed Anna and suggested he use her to get back at Carl. Pleased, Alan called Anna his future mistress and promised she'd be a worthy concubine. Chained and powerless, Anna panicked as Alan was eager to see Carl's reaction once she's humiliated. With that, he urged her to accept her fate and become his concubine. Suddenly, a furious voice shouted Alan's name, then a punch landed straight on his face. Seeing this, Anna was relieved to see Carl. Without pause, Carl kicked Alan in the lower body, causing him to scream in pain. Determined to end it, Carl struck his shoulder, then his ribs. Seeing Carl all furious, Alan cried out for help. The servants rushed to defend him, but Carl quickly overpowered them all. Seeing that Carl was losing control, Gloria hurried over to Anna. After she broke her chains, she told her to calm Carl, who was demonizing again. Anna then immediately hugged Carl and assured him that she was safe. Meanwhile, the servants then rushed to Elend's aid. Suddenly, Hera arrived at the scene. She harshly scolded Carl and accused him of repaying his father with betrayal. In response, Carl took off his necklace and drew his sword, so Anna called out to him. Alarmed, Hera asked what he planned to do. In response, Carl sliced his palm with the blade. He poured the blood on Alan and declared a holy battle to end anyone who threatened Anna. 7 days later, at the dueling arena, Carl told Alan he didn't expect him to show up after 7 days of stalling. But Alan replied he wouldn't miss the chance to squash a stink bug like Carl. Suddenly, Carl noticed his shield, which immediately gave him a bad feeling. As the battle began, Alan caught Carl off guard with Medusa's petrification laser. Still, Carl managed to dodge the attacks, which made Alan ask if a gold sword master like him was just a dancing monkey. Meanwhile, Carl realized the Shadow Oath couldn't block petrification since it wasn't direct damage. As Carl eyed the shield, Alan bragged that having Medusa's shield proved he was destined, unlike Carl. He then kept up his attacks and claimed that all of Carl's efforts were useless. When Carl tried to leap toward him, Alan quickly ordered Medusa to attack with her eyes, but Carl managed to slash her eyes first. Though she still managed to petrify his sword, the stone faded shortly after. Carl then launched a powerful strike at Elend. His attack landed and shattered one of Alan's rings, but Alan smiled and recalled he was now a golden staff mage. He then cast a black magic to summon vengeful souls to devour Carl. Witnessing this, Hugh called Alan a bastard for using black magic with 1,000 sacrificed souls. He also turned to Leon for an explanation, but Leon said it was a family secret. Meanwhile, Alan mocked Carl for not dodging a Carl slice through the vengeful souls. Hence, he couldn't believe anyone could resist such corruption. Still, he continued to release more souls against Carl, but they simply passed through him without effect. As Alan grew confused, Carl told him he'd struggled enough and should just die. Still, Alan believed that Carl could not hurt him because he was his shadow. After activating the Shadow Oath, Alan's shadows sensed the pain and began to panic. Seeing this, Carl recalled Alan's Shadow Oath transfers fatal damage. Regardless, Alan summoned the Life Scepter to drain life and ignored why his Shadow Oath failed on Carl. As Lucian and the others grew weaker, Anna began to worry for them. Suddenly, Alan taunted them for giving up, but kept punishing them. This made Carl feel conflicted. In response, Carl stabbed his sword into the ground and declared that he refused to become an animal like Alan. Thus, he activated his blood formation. The blood energy quickly shattered Alan's staff, which shocked him. As a result, the life force of the others began to return, and they called out to Carl with gratitude. Suddenly, a dragon appeared in the sky and shattered the protective barrier. After it landed behind Carl, Carl told Alan to enjoy his last breath because it would be his final one. Before that, Carl spoke with the dragon, who was also furious at Alan. Seeing this, Hugh began to wonder if the old legend was true, but Gloria was confused. He then said a dragon can transform and boost its master's power when their wills align in strong emotion. With that, Carl began to be covered in armor along his shoulders, arms, legs, and even his sword. Hence, this phenomenon was known as the dragon armor. Alan also couldn't believe Carl and the dragon had synchronized their hearts and minds. Thinking it was an illusion, Alan used forbidden magic to destroy it. Therefore, the vengeful souls began to charge toward Carl. But Carl calmly said their bond came from shared wrath toward Alan. With that, he unleashed a series of slashes to eliminate the approaching souls. After that, he turned to Elon. Striking his hand, he declared the attack was for the innocent whose talents Alan had stolen. Seeing this, Hira began to panic, but Leon ordered her to sit down. Meanwhile, Alan grew desperate and kept summoning more vengeful souls. Carl then leaped and declared the blow was for Alan's dead shadows and his own stolen past, but it's also for all the evil Alan had done in past, present, and future. With this in mind, he charged forward to strike the final blow. However, a small bead stopped his sword. Soon, he saw Hira carrying Alan as Leon scolded her for interfering. Meanwhile, Q noted Hira was once a top mage and didn't expect to see her fight again. But she seems weak after assassinating the previous family head and now relies on artifact spells. Hira then cast the 9th ring Holy Spear and said she should have killed Carl as a baby, but she would now. Unexpectedly, Leon shouted at them to stop. His voice's force shattered both the spear and Carl's dragon armor. Witnessing this, Hugh wasn't surprised because Leon's magic restraining ripple was legendary. After Leon approached, he ordered Carl to leave with his people, but Carl said he'd regret it. Hira also insisted on killing Carl, but Leon told him to leave before he changed his mind. With that, Carl said they would go. Later in the forest, Carl told Hugh not to come, but Hugh invited him to join the Essex, prompting Carl to ask if that meant war with the Coopers. Hearing that, Hugh was left speechless. Knowing the king's illness and coming war, Carl offered intel once he entered the academy, but Hugh questioned his trust. Carl then recalled a man who lost his loved one and declared he used his S-rank sword talent to become the hidden sword Saint Chris disciple. Meanwhile, a drunken man could be seen loitering nearby. As he cupped, he wondered aloud who was speaking about him behind his back. Days later, Carl can already see Gordon City's strongest defense towers. So who then warned Carl to stay cautious around the city's many nobles. As Hugh spoke, Carl saw him as a backstabber for his family and planned to handle things alone. Still, Hugh promised to handle the academy, make Anna Carl's maid so they could stay together, and house his guards to fight bandits. Hearing of nearby bandits, Carl quickly saw an opportunity. However, Q said the bandits were noble subordinates, and when Carl chose to fight them, he asked about Anna. In response, Carl asked him to send her to the Imperial Academy School of Magic. As Carl left, Gloria asked her brother's plan, and he said they'd first settle Carl's men in the manor. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Carl stood in front of a hidden bandit hideout. He then recalled Angela saying she was now 7 and secretly imprisoned here. But he knew her father, Chris, was desperately searching for her. Hence, saving Angela could earn him a shot at becoming Chris's disciple. With this in mind, Carl activated his dragon armor. Nearby, some bandits were busy training. Suddenly, their trainer sensed something approaching, but it was already too late. Their necks had been swiftly slashed. That's because Carl had used Flash of Blood to defeat them instantly. He then charged at the remaining bandits using his second skill. Unleashing the Blood Serpent, he allowed it to strike and kill them one by one. At that moment, the bandit boss named Plum appeared and rushed at Carl. However, Carl blocked Plum's sword with his own. Then he leaped into the air and unleashed a powerful Blood Shadow Slash. Realizing it was blood magic, Plum identified Carl as a Cooper and tried to talk to him. But Carl showed no mercy and slashed his neck. Using Plum's blood, Carl created blood clones. The clones chased the bandits as Carl was uninterested in the skirmish. Suddenly, Mio appeared. Carl then asked if he found the place and Mio nodded. So he ordered him to lead the way. Upon arriving, Carl began tinkering with a rock. Soon, a hidden cave entrance opened. Without delay, he descended the steps. Soon, he met a girl, so he confessed he'd take her to her father to learn sword skills since he recalled her lie-detecting ability. Hearing this, Angela said that he was telling the truth and agreed to go with him. They then began climbing the stairs back to the surface, but Carl quickly realized their escape would not be easy. That's because a skeleton monster stood before them. He then warned Angela that he could only block one attack, and she must run by then. This giant skeleton rivaled the Sword Saint's strength, so Carl warned the dragon they risked their lives. After equipping his armor, he urged Angela to prepare herself. In response, she assured him that she was ready. After taking a deep breath, he charged toward the skeleton. In response, the skeleton reached out to grab him, but he managed to block the attack and shouted for Angela to run. Angela quickly followed his order and ran. As Carl's armor began to crack, he had one final move he wanted to try. He then shouted release and triggered a powerful shockwave using the armor as a last resort. After that, he declared that no skeleton colossus would stop his revenge. Seeing Angela running, he planned to bring her out immediately, but the skeleton shifted its attention to her and launched an explosive attack. Fortunately, Mio managed to grab Angela into the sky. However, he couldn't hold on and ended up dropping her. Just in time, Carl caught her in midair and continued running from the incoming blast. But near the gate, Carl saw a seal blocking their exit and knew he had to destroy its core to escape. However, he had no time to analyze the array in detail to locate the core now. Suddenly, Angela asked if the core was in a restricted area, and Carl confirmed. So Angela pointed to one of 3 forbidden places and they headed there. On their way, Carl guessed the skeleton's slow speed limited it to firing its cannon from afar. Still, one scratch from the skeleton could seriously hurt him without armor. As they reached the room, Carl saw it was reinforced with defensive magic, but likely wouldn't last long. Suddenly, Angela said that the bow nearby seemed to be calling out to her. So Carl moved closer, and Angela was able to retrieve the bow. When he asked if it's Self's blessing, she confirmed. After that, she tells him that the second place is just ahead, but the skeleton continued chasing them. When they arrived, they saw a strange glowing ball inside the room. Upon seeing it, Carl was shocked. He realized the mage had rigged the skeleton for self-destruction. Hence, he warned Angela he might lose control next, so she had to protect herself and she agreed. With that, Carl activated the 4th skill from the swordsmanship inheritance. He then shouted the words, "Bloodbath Storm." And with that, the glowing ball connected to the skeleton exploded. But immediately after, the demon grabbed his hands and claimed him as its own. So Angela was left confused. At the Imperial Academy, Chris was dozing off. But someone reported the second prince's Deathbringer had left and asked if they should follow. Chris reacted at once upon hearing the Deathbringer was outside. Before vanishing, he told the man to guard his wine while he checked it out. Picking up the wine, the man remarked that Chris was finally free. Meanwhile, at the bandit's lair, Angela continued to call out to Carl. But Carl showed a frightening smile and attacked her, so Mio quickly grabbed her. Nevertheless, Angela continued to call for Carl with desperation. The dragon also attempted to stop Carl, but Carl only turned his wrath toward the dragon. Mio then stayed close to protect Angela, who then noticed the bow in her hands. With this, she remembered Carl saying that she had to protect herself. Therefore, she aimed the bow at him. But after releasing the arrow, Carl dodged it easily. In exchange, he attacked again with his sword, but Mio and the dragon quickly formed a shield around Angela. Still, the demon saw Angela as a tempting apple and wondered where to bite first. Meanwhile, Angela found herself unable to move, so Carl easily caught her and prepared to stab her in the chest in order to drink her pure blood. At that moment, Angela told Carl not to be sad because she knew he did his best. When a single tear fell, Carl regained consciousness and confronted the blood demon for going too far. Hearing this, the demon was shocked Carl broke free on his own. Regardless, the demon warned him to stop resisting because he'd never be free, and Carl agreed. But he also said that all he needed was one move. He then activated Blood Feast and the demon reminded him using it would ruin his future as a swordsman. After purging the demon, Carl said Chris would help finish it, but the demon warned he'd regret trusting others. Suddenly, the Deathbringer appeared and condemned Carl for troubling the second prince. He then attempted to attack Carl, but Angela quickly protected him. Unexpectedly, the attacker's hand was chopped into pieces. As his body was sliced, Chris finally appeared and comforted Angela to go home. However, Angela insisted that Carl should come with them. Chris then turned to Carl and asked if he needed help healing his body. Carl accepted it and added he wished to inherit Chris' legacy after saving Angela. But Chris noted he saved Angela, and Carl admitted his mistake still freed Chris from the second prince. 7 days later, Chris named Carl his heir. And when Carl asked if that made him a target, Chris said he could decline. Noticing Carl, students whispered about his past, but he boldly declared Chris' legacy wasn't all he wanted, and no one could stop him. At that moment, someone raised a sword against him. It was the top-ranked commoner William who accused Carl of betrayal and challenged him to a duel to strip his honors. Carl then realized Prince Andrew was using William to attack while he healed. Suddenly, William demanded he leave Chris and forfeit his title if he refused the duel. Recalling William's past challenge, Carl accepted again with resolve and added that if William lost, he must swear eternal loyalty. With that, the crowd began cheering for William to teach Carl. William immediately charged at Carl. But as he used his heady cleave, Carl evaded it with his stealing shadow. This allowed him to teleport behind William and demand his surrender. But William refused and used Enraged, while Carl's skill needed 10 seconds to reset. Meanwhile, William began advancing toward him with increasing power. Carl recognized this as William's ultimate combo, something he had already mastered at the academy. William followed up by using Swallow Return. He then ordered him to repent for his evil deeds as he attacked with another heady cleave. Suddenly, Carl recalled Chris saying that he could barely manage Blood's second technique now. Using the third technique, Wrist Collapse, or the Demon's Return, but Carl wants William's loyalty. As William's attack closed in, Carl activated his blood magic. He then unleashed the third technique, Shadow Blades, aiming it directly at William. Cornered, William was stunned by the swordsmanship, and Carl said he was glad to see his expression again. Suddenly, the blood demon started to take control once more. William sensed something wrong as the bloodlust surrounding Carl grew darker. As it began spiraling out of control, several mags stepped forward. The fire, ice, and electric mags accused Carl of black magic and prepared to act. Other students also insist that Carl must be a villain and should be killed, but William stopped them, declaring Carl had earned his eternal loyalty even if he's evil. Chris then stepped in, hitting Carl and calling him the same troublemaker he was as a kid. He also reminded others the academy forbids exploiting weakness and they face Carl later. Hearing this, the students were clearly intimidated by Chris' presence. Meanwhile, Baron Moran asked what's next, and Prince Sandro said to go to the trial hall for Carl's entry. But he still couldn't believe Carl used blood magic even though it's fatal. Witnessing this, Anna asked to follow Carl, but Cassidon thinks Carl's evil even though magic ethics were separate. However, he clarified that blood magic was an exception. At the same time, Chris reminded Carl that blood magic required total mental, physical, and willpower to master. So for the past 7 days, he had helped him recover. He also taught Carl to use bloodline magic to replace strength and enhance body control. So he questioned Carl's recklessness and warned no one would avenge the Coopers if he fell. Still, Carl said some things were worth it, and Chris wouldn't let his hair go mad. But the head of combat, George, arrived, and Chris became annoyed. Moving on, George told Carl he had 1 week to complete a trial mission as a noble recommendation. Before leaving, he warned Chris not to interfere and promised no mercy if things went wrong. Chris then called George just a lucky fool and told Carl to follow the rules, but also prepare against George's scheme. That night, Sandro learned of Carl's trial and told Moran to poison the Wilderness Realm's water. Using it, animals inside are more aggressive. Nevertheless, Sandro thought Carl's fate hinged on Chris's restraint. The next day, William warned Carl the mission would be tough, and Carl agreed since George hated his master. But William said it was more than that as everyone was gathered at the Grand Hall. As he said they awaited Carl's failure, Anna casually waved at Carl. But Carl just shook his head, and Anna understood. Carl then approached Felix, who's George's disciple on duty, and stated he was there for the trial. But Felix said it now required a team due to the sudden difficulty, so William suggested making it a solo mission. But Felix said solo missions start next week, and Carl had 3 days to complete one for admission. The students then urged Carl to leave, and Felix asked if he find a team or quit. Carl then asked if Felix doubted him, but he said it was others who didn't want Carl or William. Carl then declared that if he formed a team, Felix must kneel and make amends to William. But Felix said only death could make him kneel, so Carl replied he'd report him to Chris instead. Regardless, Felix told him to return after forming a team of 4 by evening. Suddenly, Anna and Gloria stepped up to join, and Carl told Felix to register the mission. Additionally, he reminded him to kneel and apologize as promised. As Felix kneels, Carl felt any challenger should be ready for the cost, but others viewed him as a villain. William then said Carl went too far, but Carl wouldn't let others act without consequence. Meanwhile, Felix wanted to kill Carl, but George told him to use the shame to one day crush Carl. Later at the forest of Mylessa, Carl and the others gathered together. William said the sorcerer Mylessa's inheritance was hidden here, but no one had found it. He also said the only exit was at the mountain lake top with deadly beasts below and weaker ones higher up. Additionally, the forest mist was toxic, so sword masters could last 10 hours, but mags only 6 without protection. But Carl sensed danger and told everyone to prepare for battle. As expected, he saw a girl and others fleeing from a swarm of insects. William warned to avoid Mylessa's swarm path, but the girls said they'd run 20 minutes, and it still followed. Seeing this, Anna used her fat cat magic, which quickly created a barrier to shield the group. However, William began to wonder what kind of ability that was. Carl then mocked the group and asked how geniuses lacked the courage to draw their swords. Regardless, he summoned his blood serpent. Immediately, it struck the insects and caused them to explode. But seeing no blood mana boost, he deemed them worthless. After that, he asked the girl who was relieved if she felt no shame being rescued by an enemy. In response, she called him a country bumpkin. As the fog thickened, she scoffed at calling an illegitimate Lycum an enemy and ordered him to escort her instead. Soon after, she noticed the fog surrounding them. Gloria then guessed monsters were drawn by the swarm, and William quickly warned everyone. Suddenly, a large hand emerged from the mist and the monster let out a deep growl. Seeing this, Carl declared that he would kill every last one of them. While fighting, Carl recalls the Cooper family's sword style centers on blood magic, so this makes its technique strange, unpredictable, and hard to counter. Regardless, Carl used Rock Pierce and Stealing Shadows since blood mags gain power by killing. With a precise strike, he pierces the bear. As he controls its blood, he absorbs and refines its core. Unlike fragile blood mags, blood swordsmen like Carl can advance freely, and this helps him save Anna. And regardless of magic quantity, this swordsmanship lets practitioners grow stronger by refining their blood. However, the price is that lingering malice can form a blood demon within the swordsman. But only strong will can suppress the curse, so Anna asks Carl if he's okay. He then assures her that he can regulate his power and handle the creatures. But unexpectedly, Carl begins to groan in pain, and the blood demon starts to overpower him. Reacting quickly, Anna summons the wall of stars to protect them from Carl's attacks. Gloria then asks if it's like the dragon lair, but Anna says this time feels different. The girl then says blood mags go mad, and the current Cooper head became the silent sword saint to resist it. Still, Anna activated the Starlink technique on Carl, though the other girl thought it was pointless. As Anna's eyes turned red, she entered Carl's spiritual world, saw the demon mocking her, and demanded to know what it did to him. The demon clarified that Carl consumed the same thing that killed the first Cooper head. So he offered to help save Carl if Anna let him plant a blood demon seed in her heart. Anna instantly chose to save Carl, and the demon called her foolish for it. Still, she remained determined. She then used her purify technique in an attempt to wake Carl. Seeing this, the girl said Anna wasted her youth on training. Growing impatient, Gloria told her to either help or keep quiet. Meanwhile, Anna's spell triggered purple smoke to rise from Carl. Hence, the demon mocked Carl for needing to be saved by a girl. Carl then told him to leave, but the demon said he was bound by his promise to Anna. Before leaving, the demon offered one final lesson. He told Carl to identify what made him lose control and warned that if it happened again, Anna could die. After the gem materialized, the demon bid them farewell for now. In return, Carl vowed that if they met again, the demon would regret it. After regaining control, Carl immediately used the violent feast technique on the remaining monsters. With that, the gem absorbs their blood. Suddenly, a light appeared in the sky. So William knew a half-saint came, but Carl found it odd they sent someone so strong. Meanwhile, the half-saint slowly descended upon the mountain. With a single move, he eliminated the surrounding beasts. As their blood bursts apart, the teacher Oliver thought Prince Andrew would be pleased if he brought back Carl's body. With a tool made to find blood mags, Oliver was sure he could track Carl easily. Suddenly, he heard someone mock half-saints as title seekers. Oliver then saw the students and knew he couldn't act with them watching. The students also saw Oliver and thanked him for rescuing them. Despite that, Oliver drew his sword to expose and kill Carl. But Carl quickly sensed Oliver's murderous intent. Immediately, Oliver attacked without hesitation and shocked everyone. He then told Carl he should feel honored to die by half-saint's sword strike. But Carl appeared behind him and mocked the Academy's impractical things. Oliver then attacked Carl again. But Carl used demon top blood magic to detect the poison. But Carl realized Oliver's attack wasn't poisonous. He realized Oliver's attack used an internal energy flow that he can mimic. Suddenly, a fat cat barrier pushed Oliver away from Carl. Right after, William attacked from behind using Empire technique. Oliver tried to block with his sword, but Carl struck from behind, so he decided to use his special move. He unleashed a powerful slash, sending a shockwave into the nearby lake. Soon, a five-headed dragon emerged. Oliver thought the students would be grateful for the real battle training. Instead, they panicked and said Oliver tried to kill them, while another called him a mad dog for fleeing with a scroll. Amid the chaos, one student feared dying because he still had to earn for his family. Another cried and shouted that he would keep fighting, but the five-headed dragon growled fiercely. Seeing the danger, Carl told William to block the attack. As the dragon attacked, Carl told Anna and Gloria to protect the others. Anna then cast Wall Witnesses, prompting Gloria to suggest better spell names. Carl then asked for the crystal, but when William said it for his mission, he replied it meant nothing if they couldn't kill the dragon. With the crystal, Carl avoided using Blood Shadow Blade and chose to use low-level swordsmanship. He then tossed the crystals and told William to cover him so he could prepare. William immediately stepped in to block the monster, but he was quickly thrown aside by the dragon's force. Seeing the creature closing in on Carl, William shouted for him to be careful. William then quickly covered Carl and used his Empire Sword technique. While fighting, he asked Carl how long until he absorbed the crystal. In response, Carl said he needed a few more minutes. Meanwhile, Gloria continued to help by casting Sword Dance, but she began to pass out. Seeing this, Anna quickly called out for someone to save her. Immediately, Gloria was caught and supported by a pool of blood. After that, Carl turned to face the magical beasts. Without hesitation, he used Blood Flame Slash against them. As a result, the beasts were directly struck and split into two. After successfully slaying the beasts, Carl began to walk back toward the others. Suddenly, a student named Louis stood up with his sword. As Louis approached Carl, he called him a devil and a traitor, prompting others to stop him, but he angrily raised his sword. After he plunged his sword into the ground, he apologized and thanked Carl for saving him. Seeing this, the other students also apologized to Carl and thanked him. Suddenly, the noble girl shouted for them to look up. When they looked up, they saw the swarm of insects returning. Carl immediately activated his blood vision. Using it, he tried to uncover the secret these insects were hiding. He then used Stealing Shadow and told Anne to guard herself and the others. After giving the order, he dove into the water. Seeing the insects, he realized the swarm was meant to harvest life force. The swarm's true purpose was to fuel black magic to resurrect the ancient mage, Mylessa. Carl deemed this an unworthy act, so he cut the heart with blood serpent. Soon after, the other students regained their magic and stamina. Additionally, they spotted the exit, so Carl was shocked it appeared by accident. As the students cheered, Anna checked on Carl, who said he'd recovered and found 2 things in the lake. Upon inspecting the first item, Anna recognized the bottle's poison scent and thought of bringing it for her teacher to examine. Carl gave the second item to William, who called it a disaster-grade crystal, but feared the mission failed due to his lost crystals. Unexpectedly, Louis gave Carl his collected crystals to help complete the mission. The other students offered theirs too and showed Carl was finally accepted. Meanwhile, Oliver feared the secret realm events must stay hidden where Sandra's plan and his own power would be lost. Suddenly, he noticed that the door to the secret realm opened, so he drank a power-boosting potion to go all out to avoid failure. As Carl and the others exited, Oliver wondered why they hadn't just died inside. Carl quickly sensed danger and managed to evade Oliver's sudden attack using Stealing Shadow. But Anna grew worried and Gloria stepped in to assist Carl. Carl then activated Blood Vision and warned Oliver that he had seen his death. Still, Oliver charged to kill, and Carl shouted he was the one who should die. Their clash sent both of them flying. During the scuffle, the crystal bottle slipped from Carl. At that moment, George arrived to stop the fight. He questioned Oliver, who only wanted to please Sandrew, but George came to kill the one who poisoned the realm. Hearing poison, the students panicked and asked George for proof. George responded by revealing a magic scroll made by the headmaster. He said it could detect poison and reveal the guilty party. The scroll floated then landed on the crystal bottle. Though the scroll pointed to Carl, some students doubted it, but suspected he used a taboo to complete the mission. Hearing this, George scoffed at how easily they were manipulated. He then asked Carl to speak, and Carl calmly said freeing someone was easy by twisting facts. George seized Carl and warned he wouldn't escape justice, but Carl was stunned by his speed. George then cited Article 367 that allows staff to kill students who attack and planned to use it to punish Carl. However, George's sword was intercepted by magic. Immediately after, an old man appeared and told George that this was not the right time. Realizing it was the headmaster, George quickly showed him the bottle flagged by the magic scroll. The headmaster used his appraisal and found the bottle held a royal poison meant for blood mags. But since the discovery proved nothing, he ordered Carl and Oliver in prison pending investigation. While shackling them, the headmaster thought detaining Carl was safer due to ongoing threats against him. When someone objected, he insisted the investigation would continue at the academy. Meanwhile, the students debated if Carl was guilty or framed by Oliver. Later, in the academy dungeon, Chris told Carl the poison came from Sandrew and targeted blood mags, so Carl vowed to kill him. But Chris told him to stay put, while Oliver thought Carl was a fool for saying that since Chris' job is to protect the royal family. In response, Carl was surprised Oliver still served his master, and Oliver replied it was his honor. Hearing this, Carl recalled how they once saw serving the Cooper family as an honor. So he asked if Oliver ever felt his talent served the unworthy, and added he must feel abandoned now. Oliver tensed at the mention of his family, and Carl offered to help him break free if he confessed, but refusing to betray his family, so Carl said they'd see if his master would truly protect him. Later, someone visited Oliver in the dungeon. He was told Sandra arranged a duel with Carl at the Beast Arena as his final chance. The visitor gave him the Vine of Life, and Oliver vowed to obey Sandrew even if it cost his life. As Oliver stared at the vial, he heard Carl say it meant death and glory after was pointless. With that, he saw they were both sacrifices and questioned if glory was worth losing his life. Later at the arena, match began as Carl and Oliver appeared. The announcer said the two would fight amid beast attacks and the winner would earn Sandra's reward. Soon after, the beast awoke and quickly impaled several nearby people. The duel began, and Oliver claimed Carl's tricks were useless against wide-range attacks. Though attacked, Carl struck back and asked if he knew the strength of a sword prodigy trained since age 4. Unexpectedly, Carl was caught by the beast. Fully recovered, he tested Chris's silent slash and declared Oliver couldn't beat him now. Meanwhile, Sandra saw Oliver not using the potion and ordered someone to fetch someone. Moments later, Oliver's mother, Grace, who's Sandra's cook, was brought out. Seeing her, Oliver feared what might happen if he failed. With this in mind, he pulled out the potion and drank it. Immediately, his body was filled with immense power. As the beast attacks, Oliver charges at Carl to protect his mother. While fighting, Oliver asked Carl to save his mother and offered help with the vines. After throwing Carl, he shouted that only his death could save his mother. As the beast continued to pursue Carl, Oliver begged him. After that, unleashed his ultimate move, Flame Slash. Thus, he successfully pierced the beast. Witnessing this, Sandrew calls Oliver worthless while Grace cries out in fear. As his mother wept, Oliver hoped his death would calm Sandrew and that Carl would protect his mother. As the Vine's core activated, Oliver begged Carl to protect his mother, who's the reason he served Sandra. As the core merged with his chest, Carl stabbed him while saying no one would be saved if he died. Carl shattered the core and told Oliver to live and repaid his debts for his family's sake. With that, he used flesh rebirth on him. Through this, Carl found the Vine's blood could cure him and told Oliver to rest first. Meanwhile, Sandra was surprised that blood magic beat both a disaster beast and a half-sword saint. Acknowledging Carl's win, he offered treasures or a pardon for his crimes. But Carl asked for Grace, making Sandra suspect he sought revenge through Oliver's family. As guards forced Grace to bow, Sandra noted Carl was a true blood magic cultivator. He added Carl reeked of chaos and invited him to be his blade. But Carl questioned Sandra why Oliver's family was discarded despite his obedience. In response, Sandra called Oliver's death a tragedy, so Carl asked what if he refused to join. Sandra warned that without protection, Carl would be exiled and blamed for the real incident. At that moment, Sandra's guard lunged at Carl for rejecting the offer, but Carl stopped him with his sword. Suddenly, more guards burst in and accused Carl of being an assassin. Amid the chaos, Oliver ran to his joyful mother, but this made Sandra call him a traitor. However, Carl declared that it was Sandra who was destined for hell. With that, he used Stealing Shadow to slip past the guards. After cornering Sandra, he coldly remarked that authority was meaningless now. Desperate, Sandro asked Chris why Carl wasn't dead and if he too was a traitor. In response, Chris drew his sword to end the other guard. After that, he declared that his loyalty belonged solely to the king. Holding the potions, he claimed the right to investigate and felt lucky Carl saved Angela or he might ended up like Oliver. Meanwhile, Sandro feared the investigation could get him confined, letting his brother take over before the Academy conference. So he claimed the potions were given to Moran and denied any knowledge of them. Claiming ignorance, Sandro offered to punish Moran, but Carl knew the truth and chose to strike Moran first to weaken him. Just then, Moran arrived. Without hesitation, Carl summoned a blood serpent to strike, but a shield blocked it and a voice asked why he was attacking royalty. Hallen then stepped out from behind and declared Moran a baron. So even if Moran killed Carl, it would only mean an apology and gold to the Coopers. But since Carl survived, no imperial law had been broken. He then apologized for not controlling Carl, and Sandra coldly said Cooper dogs belong in cages. Hearing this, Alan looked at Carl and asked if he was ready to be caged again. Later outside, Chris expressed surprise at Carl's earlier behavior. When Alan insulted him, Carl stayed calm, which is something that surprised Chris. Carl calmly replied there was no need for anger since he'd beaten Alan before. But because of the Shadow Oath, Alan could not die. And as a result, the Shadows in the Cooper family would be the ones to suffer. With this in mind, he figured wouldn't send Alan alone and suspected she was nearby too. Since Sandra was leading the students' exchange, he'd likely invite the 7 great families to build his faction. Suddenly, students attacked and insulted Carl, who replied that only toothless dogs bark the loudest. He added that the true battle would be at the exchange where he'll be facing worthy S-rank talents. So he quickly defeated them because he had no time for pointless fights. Chris watched silently and was relieved that Carl was finally maturing. Later, a nearby bird overheard talk of Carl's meeting with the headmaster about his blood magic inheritance. The bird flew after them, silently following them to the training grounds. There, Headmaster Albus told Carl to strike with his strongest move, but Carl hesitated. Hence, Albus made the first move. A hand appeared beside Carl. Before he could react, a powerful and wordless punch hit him. Luckily, his blood magic softened the blow, though it still hit like a sword saint slash. Afterward, Albus summoned a puppet and told Carl to use his full power. This time, Carl agreed without hesitation. Carl used Blood Storm of Carnage, and Albus calmly noted it needed more precise focus. Following that, Carl used Blood Flame, and Albus warned he was burning his own blood energy. Undeterred, Carl used Serpent Slash, but Albus called it reckless since it might awaken the demon. Albus then chained the evolving demon as Carl's force technique drained his blood and triggered a violent backlash. When the demon demanded release, Albus realized it had gained a consciousness like Blood Cooper's. Alarmed by Carl's state, Chris warned Albus he wouldn't last much longer. But Albus calmly said not to worry since he had sealed the demon to protect Carl. He forbade Carl from using blood magic until he mastered the demon. Carl then refused because the exchange ceremony was near. Chris then offered to train him, and Albus warned his blood magic addiction could be disastrous. Albus then asked if Carl wasn't curious how the first and second Cooper armies died in one night. Carl guessed blood magic went out of control, and this explains the lack of records. Albus confirmed it and urged him to master blood magic to protect those he cared about. After Carl thanked Albus, Chris invited him to begin training. Unseen, the spying bird followed them to their secret training. However, Chris noticed its presence. A moment later, the bird blushed. After all, it accidentally witnessed Carl unclothed. Embarrassed, it flew off as Chris muttered the academy would soon grow more chaotic. Meanwhile, the bird transformed into a young woman. Recalling the bath incident, Luna of the 7 great families blamed Chris and confidently aimed to eliminate Carl at the exchange ceremony. At the arena, the academy's annual new student duel began. Even Morin noted that the great Duke family heads were eager to witness the event. Beside the dukes, teachers, and Sandro, Morin declared they gathered to witness the new student's potential. He added that Sandro would grant the winner a top academy slot and one personal wish. However, Carl knows Sandro plans to recruit people, but he also wants to use the wish to destroy the Cooper family. Morin explained the duel has the preliminaries and the eliminations. When 8 students advance to one-on-one matches, the final victor would be decided. Hence, first 8 to sever a Hydra's head and bring it out would advance to eliminations. With the announcement made, the competition began. Almost immediately, a student using nature magic swiftly sliced off a Hydra's head. Carl spotted Luna and noted her skill with magic arrows and raven transformation. Looking at her raven form, he saw the ceremony was full of hidden talents. But a massive axe suddenly appeared and hit the Hydra's head, so Luna demanded Tanoko had stolen her target. In response, Thora casually thanked her and claimed the Hydra's head. Irritated, Luna attacked, and Carl watched curiously who'd win between King of the Forest or King of Storms. However, Luna's assault failed to break through Thora's defenses. Thora left with a Hydra's head and teasing Luna, while Carl noted his family's monstrous defense. Meanwhile, the students were stunned that Thora was first and commended his speed. Suddenly, a scythe-wielding girl struck the Hydra and claimed the spotlight. It was Gloria, and she ordered them not to let northern barbarians shame their empire. Inspired by her words, William rallied the students to charge forward. As the Hydra grew enraged, students were warned to brace, especially Anna nearby. In response, Carl rushed in to shield her against the Hydra. While Anna was impressed by him, Carl sensed Hydra was being restrained to stop deaths. Just then, William proudly claimed the Hydra head, so Carl thought their group might all advance. But instead of another head, Carl aimed to retrieve something more valuable from the Hydra. With that, he warned the others to retreat, so he used this chance to train. Charging forward, he endured the Hydra's blows without blood magic by relying on his strengthened body. When the Hydra launched a blaze-type magical attack, grabbed its head. He then redirected the flames toward another. With that, he successfully breaks its regenerating shield, and Carl prepares for his next move. He knew that after 8 heads were severed, the Hydra will use its core to regenerate. Hence, it leaves it extremely vulnerable. So he readied Cleave and Blood Resonance to steal the Hydra's regeneration. Just before he struck, his attack was deflected. While he's being restrained, a mocking voice calls him foolish. It was Alan, and he mocked Carl for failing to claim the toughest head. He also teased that if Carl begged, he might give it to him. But Carl coldly called him thick-skinned for even suggesting such a thing. Seeing Carl unfazed, Alan noted his friends were restrained and asked if he'd abandon them too. In response, Carl broke free and shouted Alan's name in fury. In that moment, the suppression collar on the Hydra shattered. As the Hydra went berserk, Carl growled that Alan was courting death. Seeing the Hydra seal break, Sandra secretly hoped some students would die. Meanwhile, Carl faced Alan, who vowed to repay him for past humiliation. With that, he called out to Lisa to attack. He then boasted that he had brought the fiercest dog from the Sana family. Carl recognized Lisa and knew her life-training magic would make battling her and the Hydra difficult. Knowing this, he chose to target the Hydra first. As the Hydra raged, Carl plotted to make Alan face its fury, but Alan mocked him and said destroying Lisa's hair wouldn't stop her. In response, Lisa began absorbing the Hydra's surrounding flames. She twisted them into monstrous hounds, which Carl found interesting but foolish, because he knew using the Hydra like that would only enrage it further. But with the Hydra breaking free, Carl had to finish Alan quickly. Seeing Carl ready to strike, Lisa warned Alan and sent her fiery hounds to help. But Carl cut them down and mocked Lisa for thinking they could stop him. Unexpectedly, Alan used damage transfer to send the hit to Lisa. Witnessing this, William asked Carl if he needed help, but Carl only ordered him to get Lisa out of the arena. As they rushed out, the announcer named Gloria Anna and the Nameless Knight as the next qualifiers. William's name was also called while he tried to calm Lisa down. He also told her staying in the arena would only delay Carl's fight with Alan. Finally, Lisa's face changed when William said Alan wasn't worth her life. Seeing William's face, Lisa relaxed as he reassured her that protect themselves won stronger. Lisa then placed 7, so William hoped to face her fairly next time. Seeing this, Alan cursed Lisa in anger for betraying him, but Carl ignored him and asked if he was ready to die with no one left to take the hit. But Alan claimed he'd be the last to advance and left Carl behind his Hydra food. However, Carl calmly swung his sword. He sliced through the Hydra and then asked Alan if he still believed that As he pierced the Hydra's head, he thanked Alan for helping him. He added that Chris once mentioned an ancient blood magic ritual from Lost Text that by mixing his blood with the beast's, he could create blood resonance. After gaining the Hydra's regeneration, he said it proved humans could now access beasts' innate powers. Before Alan could respond, his arm was suddenly severed. He then cursed Carl for cutting off his arm, which couldn't heal due to the Hydra's corrosive power Carl gained. Regardless, Carl asked him if he had ever felt the torment of the Shadow Oath. Alan then saw why Carl survived, but wrongly believed shadows could keep carrying and sharing his damage. Nevertheless, Carl declared his regeneration made the damage meaningless, and Alan would feel all the pain instead. While screaming in pain, Alan called Carl a lunatic and then begged for death. But Carl said death was too easy, and he wanted Alan to live in constant fear. After Carl claimed the Hydra's main head, he secured the last spot in the qualifiers. Watching from a distance, Thor saw the main head and admitted Carl must be strong to take it. Carl also saw Thor and recalled his skills, so they both anticipated their battle. Facing someone strong like Thor first, Carl suspected Sandrew had rigged the match. Still, he aimed to win without a single loss. As Thor attacked, Carl saw the strikes were too fast and strong to block head-on. Still, he skillfully dodged Thor's simultaneous attacks with ease. Frustrated, Thor called Carl a coward for avoiding a direct fight. Standing on Thor's axe, Carl calmly put on a ring and reminded him the Drank family preferred ranged attacks over direct combat. Provoked, Thor dropped his weapon and swung a fist for Carl to repeat the insult. But Carl easily caught the punch and noted Thor's small size had great strength. With that, Thor realized Carl had provoked him on purpose to trigger a counterattack. Hence, he immediately summoned his twin axes and began to release his full power. Meanwhile, Carl was surprised Thor's defense held because his ring left no mark. Eager to punish Carl's arrogance, Thor charged in for another strike. Just before the axe could land, Carl halted him with blood resonance. With that, Thor found himself unable to move. Carl then explained losing composure only gave him the chance to exploit openings. With a swift sword swing, he ordered Thor to accept defeat. As Thor was flung backward, he called out to Fascia. In response, an elite ice dragon appeared. Fascia then immediately attacked and severed the blood link. Now freed, Thor praised Carl for making him summon Fascia, but this also marked Carl's downfall. Seeing this, Chris said summoning was against the rules, but Moin allowed it since Thor was a dragon knight and said Carl could summon too. With that, Thor ordered Fascia to strike Carl with a powerful attack. Surrounded, Carl realized the match wouldn't end unless he closed the distance. But Thor used summon lightning and was ready to unleash a dragon knight's full power. Above, Sander praised Thor while his proud father agreed. He also said his lightning power marked him as future leader of the Dranken Dragons. After the strike, Thor said dying by it should be Carl's greatest honor. Just then, a magic-immune dragon appeared beside Carl, who told Thor not to celebrate yet. Thor and his father were then shocked since this dragon was a rare species thought extinct. Alan had once failed to trigger its evolution, but Carl had succeeded. So it had now gained lightning powers alongside its fire and wind attributes. Carl then ordered the dragon to show its new powers as Thor watched in disbelief. Using the dragon's lightning, Carl closed in on Thor to say this would decide the true winner. As he announced his victory, the dragon released a surge of lightning and electrocuted Thor. After that, Carl then turned to the referee for the official results. Soaring skyward, Carl felt the sun's warmth, which is something he once thought a shadow like him could never have. Meanwhile, Thor's father angrily called Carl a thief for stealing the Drank family treasure. He grabbed Thor's axe and hurled it at Carl while demanding the dragon's return, but the dragon nimbly dodged the weapon. Unfazed, Carl asked if the dragon truly belonged to anyone else. With that, he ordered the dragon to force Thor's father to face reality. In a world of weapons and magic, dragon cavalry was the battlefield's strongest force. To stop any family from rising too high, the king wiped out all known magic dragons. But the last dragon eggs were sealed in Crystal City with the key split between the Cooper and Isaac families. Now Thor's father felt relief that magic dragon survived, but regret it now served Carl. Still, he asked if the dragon had siblings in hopes to elevate the Drank family if they claimed one. But Carl replied it was the last magic dragon and the rest were destroyed. When asked who gave the order, Carl told him to come closer. He whispered it was someone who most feared the Drank family's rise like Sandro. As Carl walked away, he reminded him that a dragon without wings or teeth is the easiest to tame. Afterward, Carl reminded William his next opponent is from the Forest family, who excelled in traps and hunting. So at the arena, he advised William to use speed, close and fast, and strike hard. Following the advice, William immediately charged toward his opponent. Unexpectedly, Luna anticipated his move and deployed her defenses just in time. Watching, Carl thought William should use Luna's counterattack and strike when she slowed. Suddenly, William used explosive energy to break free from Luna's vines. He followed with a swallow counter and pierced, but the moves quickly drained his stamina. Luna took advantage of this and fired her crossbow. In response, William used a block counter to deflect the shot, but Carl saw William was at risk if his next attack failed. When William delivered his final strike, Carl immediately saw that he had failed. Meanwhile, William looked around to find where Luna had gone. Without warning, she appeared behind him and mocked his sword skills. While he can't move, she begins absorbing William's aura. Seeing this, Carl assumed William's energy was being drained, then he realized that it was due to the effects of hallucinogenic plants. Luna had cleverly planted fly agaric spores within the vines earlier. So once the vines broke, mushrooms quickly grew and released spores. And during William's last attack, he had unknowingly inhaled them. Understanding her strategy, Carl silently vowed to defeat her for William's sake. In the end, William was sent out flying and Luna was declared the winner. As he fell, Carl rushed forward to catch him. But Lace's hair reached him first and Carl wondered when she grew close to William. Additionally, he wonders why she was hiding far away. Afterwards, Anna found William unresponsive due to the strange hallucinogenic energy. Hearing this, Carl told Lisa to use her black magic to give William a mild electric shock. When the jolt worked, William woke up and thanked Lisa, causing her to blush. Without a word, she ran away and left him confused. Meanwhile, Anna saw Lisa's memories and expected Hira's punishment, but Carl doubted it before her match. At that moment, Hira was already punishing Lisa for failing Alan and still joining the competition. Striking her, Hira demanded to know if a mere dog like her deserved it. When Lisa was a child, she was a poor orphan raised in the Sana family's dark magic temple. Their magic fed on pain, so Lisa's dog was killed before her. And the Sana family had no morals, so humanity meant nothing to them. Thus, Lisa was one of the few survivors that was turned into a deadly killer. Now, Hira demanded if Lisa had forgotten their family's teachings. She reminded her that true loyalty meant total sacrifice for her master. But since Lisa failed to protect Alan, Hira declared her useless. In response, Lisa admitted her failure. She bowed and accepted her punishment. But Carl's sword intervened and struck Hira's weapon aside. He reminded Hira she couldn't abuse Lisa freely at the academy. Seeing Carl appear, she was pleased that he had approached her first. She raised her hand with a ring and planned to call her Carl like Lisa. Carl then realized Hira didn't know Alan was bound to him by the Shadow Oath. But when Hira understood what he meant, she cursed him. In response, Carl warned her to wish for his happiness or Alan would feel his pain instead. As he approached Lisa, Hira asked mockingly if he fancied himself a savior. She also emphasized that Lisa could never escape the Sana family's control. Seeing Hira's disregard for life, Carl drew his sword. But Anna warned that fighting Hira risked his disqualification and only Lisa's warmest memories could free her. Carl then told Lisa she still had a match to win and she could stay. At that moment, William's face flashed through Lisa's mind and she remembered the promise she made. Slowly, she reached for her collar as Carl urged her to leave the basement. Seeing Lisa beginning to resist, Hira prepared to increase her torment. But Lisa was determined not to die there and finally broke free. Immediately, she ran toward the exit to keep her promise, but she's already exhausted. Fortunately, William caught her and was relieved she was safe. However, Hira insisted Lisa was still theirs despite the broken magic. But Albus arrived and declared that Lisa was a match participant, not property. Still, Hira emphasized the academy couldn't protect Lisa after the duels. Albus then asked if making Lisa his student meant defiance since Hira no longer had sign authority. As she left, Carl thanked Albus who said he came only at William's request. They then entrusted Lisa to William, which left him confused, but Anna told him not to disturb Lisa who's now resting in his arms. Meanwhile, Carl thanked Oliver for revealing the secret basement. Oliver then revealed that Lisa was forfeited, so Anna advanced. But in another group stage, Gloria faced the Nameless Knight. Despite her strength, she lost without landing a hit. Back at the arena, Moran urged Carl to enter or face disqualification in 3 seconds. In response, a bolt of lightning struck his side. Following that, Carl remarked that everyone seemed a little too impatient. Without wasting time, he called on Luna to begin the match. Luna immediately fired her crossbow at him and the arrows laced with hallucinogens. Carl then countered with Thunder Flame and blocked her old tricks. Impressed, she praised his move as cool and admitted defeat. Moran then announced Sandru banned Thunder Flame, making Carl scoff at the Academy's fairness. Next came the match between Anna and the Nameless Knight. As Carl passed by, he heard Cassidy warn Anna not to punch the knight due to his strong defense, but he ignored Carl. So Carl simply advised Anna to be careful and retreat if needed. As he left, Carl wondered who the unknown knight was from his past. Meanwhile, Anna attacked with Crystal Mare, Lightning Crackle, and Rock Boom, which surprised Cassidy with her 3 unique spells. However, the knight stood calmly as the spells flew toward him. He then said Anna's spells failed, and Carl suspected the knight absorbed magic. Suddenly, the knight declared that power scales always balance equally. Immediately, Anna was thrown back by a wind spell that struck and defended. As Carl caught her, he realized the knight was too strong and the match was lost. Afterwards, the final match is Carl versus the knight, where the winner will be the Academy's new head. Hearing this, George and others laughed at the thought of Carl leading the Academy. As the announcer asked who would win between the knight or Carl, the match began. Carl stepped up confidently, vowing to win despite facing his toughest opponent yet. Moreover, he sought to reveal the knight and end the prejudice, but the knight scoffed. Carl then mocked the magic-fed weapon, and the knight praised him for revealing its true form. Still, Carl intended to test whether the knight was truly invincible. The knight confidently declared Carl could never break his defense. So using his wind, he enveloped him in the name of justice, but Carl simply snapped his fingers. He then asked if the knight was a judge and that a mere wind couldn't defeat his boiling blood. Additionally, he claimed there's always a blind spot and formed a blood lava domain. While doing so, he stressed that others failed to break the knight's defense, not from weakness. As he listened, the knight saw Carl's blood seeping in his shield. With that, Carl demanded to see how much blood magic he could swallow. In response, he called Carl a battle lunatic worthy of being his opponent. With that, he proposed that they have a proper duel. Unimpressed, Carl warned not to underestimate a blood swordsman shaped by the shadows. Before the knight could attack, he was caught off guard by Carl's attack. Looking around, he realized too late Carl had planted blood traps while he blocked overhead attacks. Regardless, Carl aimed his sword at him to reveal his identity. The knight caught his sword and praised him as the first to get that close. Still, he insisted the battle wasn't over and unleashed angel wings for offense and defense. Pushed back, Carl realized this opponent was far from ordinary. The knight's wings boosted his power and speed, so he wasn't to be taken lightly. Determined to give him no time, Carl began attacking. The knight blocked it and declared it was time Carl learned the rules. He retaliated with another powerful strike, but Carl only told him to come at him. As their blades clashed, the knight found himself invigorated by the duel. From the stands, Chris recognized the knight as a former trainee but didn't know why he'd returned. Meanwhile, Sandra was also surprised and ordered Moran to assassinate him. Back on the field, the knight saw Carl as his equal but questioned his growing strength. In response, Carl triggered rapid healing and asked if the knight thought blood magic was just for traps. Taking it seriously, the knight summoned holy swords to drain Carl's blood with a wide-range barrage. But Carl warned him not to underestimate a blood magic swordsman. As Carl summoned a blood monster, the knight asked who would win between light and shadow. As his sword struck, he asked if Carl still planned to fight to the end, but Carl smirked and told him to struggle with energy. In response, the knight called Carl cunning for binding him with blood energy. Carl then said blood energy lies and suffocates, but also wanted to see the knight's trump cards. The knight quickly unleashed Sana's hand of the undead that restrained all life. He also used Death Wither to drain vitality and admitted he didn't expect to need it. Thus, he admitted that Carl had already won by pure skill. Though the knight showed goodwill, Carl's instinct screamed at the looming threat. Without warning, an assassin lunged toward them. Carl quickly pulled the knight aside and sensed the ambusher held great power. Suddenly, the knight's mask fell, revealing Crown Prince Leonhard, who once led rebel suppression, but died young. Now, Carl realized Leonhard's death wasn't natural, but caused by ongoing noble assassinations. Unfazed, Leonhard shattered the attackers with his spectral arm. As the bodies fell, he muttered they never stopped hunting him once they caught his trail. Thus, Leonhard used Vault form to borrow weapons from the Empire's pawn shop to fight rebels. Carl also joined to impress Leonhard and to not worry about Sandro anymore. Besides, he hadn't yet used his full power since rebirth, so now is the time. With a flash of his sword, he declared that a river of blood would flow. All fired up, Carl and Leonardo were ready to kill everyone. Soon, Carl and Leonard found themselves surrounded by bandits. Without hesitation, Leonard used Eternal Stars to stop the challenging insects. Eager to show Thunder Flame Dragon's power, Carl joined the attack. As he struck the enemies, he mocked their pathetic attempt at assassination. Meanwhile, Leonardo summoned his moon scythe to punish those who threatened him. Suddenly, an arrow flew toward him. Blood splattered, but it was Carl's blood magic and warned Leonardo to stay alert. So Leonardo thanked him and proposed ending the fight together. Moments later, the remaining bandits were incinerated, and silence fell over the arena. Yet, Sandra is determined to kill Leonard and performs a blood sacrifice ritual. The platform then began to move and sink. Suddenly, a potion struck Leonardo and disabled his angel wings. Furthermore, he was unable to summon strength. Tapping into regeneration, Carl realized Leonardo would have died without him just like before. At that moment, Carl's dragon unleashed under hellfire to clear the poisonous mist. Suddenly, a flesh-eating sandworm appeared, so Carl quickly warned Leonhard. Carl knew the sandworm shell resisted magic, so the poisoned Leonhard had to stay away. Without delay, he summoned his dragon. It then used Dragon Stop to crush the sandworm's protective shell. Then with a blast of dragon breath, the creature was scorched. After that, the dragon followed up by dispersing it with a powerful swipe, so it was sent towards Sandrew, who demanded if Carl was openly attacking royalty. But Leonard said Carl saved him and asked Sandra why the assassination happened on his watch. Feigning innocence, Sandra claimed he was hurt too and vowed to find the mastermind. Leonard then declared that Carl saved royalty and granted him noble status by law. Hence, he made Carl a discount and tasked him to help Sandra investigate. Besides, he thinks Sandra is linked to the sandworm. After Carl thanked Leonhard, he reminded Sandra of his win and the promised wish. Sandra agreed, though he planned to enslave the winner, but Leonard already claimed Carl. Carl then wished for the Cooper family's Silver Mist Swamp as his fiefdom. Hearing this, Leon called Carl greedy since thief showed imperial rank. Even so, Leonard said Carl deserved a thief, but noted its political sensitivity. Instead, he offered Carl the Ink Ebis Ridge near the imperial capital. But Sandrew already spent a fortune for the king's promise of the black gold rich ridge. Moreover, it held half the empire's magic, so he wouldn't give it up. Alright, that's the end of the story. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.